Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a treasure hid in the field, the which when a man hath found, he hideth, and for joy thereof goeth and selleth all that he hath, and buyeth that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a merchant man seeking goodly pearls, who, when he had found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a net that was cast into the sea, and gathered of every kind, which when it was full, they drew to shore, and sat down, and gathered the good into vessels, but cast the bad away.
A transfer of rulership is coming, and the kingdom of heaven will be on earth. Righteousness will be spread throughout the whole four corners of the earth. Wickedness will be put down.
You are my servants. Remember your place. We obey you, Majesty. We are honored to toil for you.
The time is right. The harvest will yield. The world swiftly.
A transfer of rulership is coming, and the kingdom of heaven will be on earth. Righteousness will be spread throughout the whole four corners of the earth. Wickedness will be put down.
Yes, Your Highness. We will obey. You are doing well. Thank you, my king. Let them see the might of the throne. Yes, Your Majesty. Work. Let the land yield its riches. Yes, Your Majesty. I survey my domain. They are toiling as commanded. Yes, Your Majesty. We work until the sun sets. Let them work.
The yield today is satisfactory. Keep them working. Yes, Your Majesty.
A transfer of rulership is coming, and the kingdom of heaven will be on earth. Righteousness will be spread throughout the whole four corners of the earth. Wickedness will be put down.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem, Rakakadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to his younger brothers, and peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word and truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem, Rakakadash, pushing me the Father, Shalom. to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners who have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashim Shah. All right. And what I want to get into with this lesson, is dealing with, the Lord anger, appeased. Okay. And the Lord's anger being appeased began with Yahweh Shah. We're going to get into, some of these things. Lord will, you brothers and you few sisters are edified. Now, when you get to the book of Isaiah, chapter 12 and 1, it says, and in that day, thou shalt say, O Lord Yahweh, by Hashem Yahweh Shah, I will praise thee. Though thou wast angry with me, thy anger is turned away, and thou comfortest me. So the Lord went from a phase of being angry with his people, all right, to his anger being appeased. Okay. And that anger, was due to our disobedience. We provoke the Lord, all right, to anger. When you go here, um, Deuteronomy 32. Let's get this real quick. All right, when you go to Deuteronomy 32, we as a people, provoked our power, all right, to anger. We went off, all right, even when the Lord, all right, as he made a covenant with his people, well, we went off, okay, from our end of the deal. We began to serve other gods, follow their customs of the heathen, all right, and the law was made for us to be superior to the heathen, okay, but we demoted ourselves and began to imitate, the heathen as a people, okay, and embarrass the Most High. Okay, all the things that the Lord done for us as a people in the midst of these heathens, and then we went and began to behave as these heathens and follow them. Okay, and that's what got this northern kingdom taken in captivity, and that's what got us took into several captivities and eventually shipped off, man. Okay, but ultimately the Lord set it up for Yahweh Shai to be a sacrifice that would appease the Lord's wrath, all right, in these latter days. Okay, Deuteronomy 32 and 14 said, but of kine, all right, and milk of sheep with fat of lambs and rams, all right, of the breed of Bashan, and goats with the fat of kidneys of wheat. And thou, it says, and thou didst drink the pure blood of the grape. And see, this is when we, all right, were being taken care of. This is speaking of the abundance we had. All right, the fineries, okay, the best foods and the livestock, okay, the best wine, okay, plenty of bread. Okay, this represents abundance. The Lord, you know, He had us taken care of, man. He was our provider. The Lord had us in the place of abundance. You see, but what did we do? It said, but Jeshurun waxed fat, which is Jeshurun Yasha in the Hebrew, which means upright one. Okay, so we waxed fat and kicked. Okay, so the Lord, began to pamper us as a people. The Lord pretty much like a man whining and dining his woman. Okay, fine dining. Imagine someone, as a woman, you can fine dining, daily. And that's the position we was in as a people. It said, thou art waxing fat, thou art grown thick, thou art covered with fatness. Then he forsook the Most High, which made him, and lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation, man. So we forsook our power. Okay? What was the main way we forsook our power? We made light of the Heavenly Father. Okay? We made light of our rock. So we lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. Okay? It says they provoked him to jealousy with strange gods. With abomination provoked they him to anger. Okay, so we provoke the Lord's anger by serving, other gods, following other gods, man. Even in this time, in this life, man, Christianity, those are other gods. Okay, or whatever we was into outside the truth, it was rooted in some type of Satanism, other gods, idolatry, self-worship. Okay, strange gods, man. Okay, but through, all right, the sacrifice of Yahweh Shai, there's a grace period. Okay, there's a grace period that we have in this time. All right, where the Lord's anger is being appeased. Okay, Yahushua, he said, you know, well, his sacrifice, when you go into it, Yahushua's sacrifice, you know, it allowed us to have an audience with our power again, you know, and since we have the Lord's ear through Yahushua, well, we want to be appeased into our power, okay? As we come back to obedience through faith, as we humble down, well, that's appeasing to the Heavenly Father. You see? So let's go. Let's get this and because Yahushua, he set the standard, okay, for the Heavenly Father being pleased because the Lord was displeased with us as a people, okay? But through the sacrifice of Yahushua, well, that appeased the Heavenly Father, you know, and us being obedient to his son, okay? Well, that makes the Lord appeased with us. He begins to be pleased with us as we conform, all right, to Yahushua. As we come under the banner of Yahushua, well, that's pleasing to the Heavenly Father. Matter of fact, let's get this show. Let's get these accounts. Okay, when the Lord, okay, shows that He's pleased with His power. Matthew 3 and 15 says, and Yahushua answering said unto him, suffer it to be so now, for thus it becometh us to fulfill all righteousness. Then he suffered him. Okay, so this Yahushua coming to be baptized by John the Baptist. And Yahushua, when he was baptized, went up straightway out of the water, and lo, the heavens were opened unto him, and he saw the Spirit of the Most High descending like a dove and lighten, okay, and light upon him. And lo, a voice from heaven saying, this is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. Okay, so Yahushua, you know, he had a record of being pleasing to the Father. The Father himself, all right, proclaimed that his Son, all right, he was well pleased with his Son. All right, and the Heavenly Father is well pleased with those that follow his Son. Okay, so let's go to this word pleased here. All right, in the Greek.
Strong's G 2106, Eudakeo. Eudakeo.
All right, it said it seems good to one. All right, to one's good pleasure. Okay, to think it good. All right, to prefer, to choose rather, to be well pleased with, to take pleasure in, to be favorably inclined towards one, to be favorably inclined towards one. So the Heavenly Father, all right, he took pleasure. He was favorably inclined, all right, towards Yahushua. Okay, and as we come back, okay, under Yahushua through the teaching, because we come back through Yahushua. You know, the teaching of this word is the teaching of Yahushua, prophecy, Yahushua, man. You know, the volume of the book is Yahushua. You see? So as we come back to Yahushua, all right, we come back under the banner of Yahushua, because the only way to come back to the Father is through Yahushua. You know, to deal with Yahushua, to serve Yahushua. When we're teaching, we're directly serving Yahushua. When we're being a brother, okay? When we're toiling and laboring in his ministry, we're serving Yahushua. Okay, and it's pleasing to the Father. That's why, let's go here, another one in Matthew. Okay, let's go here. All right, this is Matthew chapter 1. Let me chill out. Matthew chapter 17, verse 1. It says, and after 6 days, Yahushua taking Peter, James, and John, his brother, and bringing them up into a high mountain apart. And he was transfigured before them, and his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light. And behold, there appeared unto them Moses and Elijah, all right, talking with him. So this is a transfiguration, okay, because Moses and Elijah wasn't really there, okay? It was a hologram, you know, with Yahushua in the middle, okay? Yahushua was actually there, okay? But Moses and Elijah was holograms, you know, that was beside him. Then answered Peter and said unto Yahushua, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If thou wilt, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for thee, one for Moses, and one for Elias. okay, and one for which is Elijah, okay. It says, while he yet spake, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and beheld a voice out of the cloud, which was a chariot, all right, and this was the heavenly Father, okay, in his chariot, which said, "This is my beloved son." Okay, so above, all right, Moses above Elijah, okay, the law and the prophets, okay, he exalted Yahweh. Okay. It said, "This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. Hear ye him." So the heavenly Father, all right, once again, he vouched that he was pleased, okay, with Yahweh, and then he commanded, okay, the disciples, which is all of us, okay, all of the elect beginning with the first fruits, okay, he's commanding all of us, hear ye him, okay, hear ye him. Okay, so to be pleasing to the Father is to follow the Son. That's why here is to follow Yahweh, because that's the path, okay, to appeasing, and the Heavenly Father, okay, Yahweh Shai, all right, he pushed. What did Yahweh Shai push? Okay, we'll get that. Well, let's go here. This is on the we'll jump up, okay, because it's Yahweh Shai, who sends back the comforter. We read Isaiah 12 and 1 again. It says, "He that have my commandments and keepeth them, he it is that loveth me." And we're going to go into those commandments. Okay, "He that have my commandments and keepeth them, he it is that loveth me. And he that loveth me shall be loved of my Father, and I will love him and will manifest myself to him." Okay, so he that have my commandments, okay, which is obedience, and keepeth them, he it is that loveth me, you know. So obeying Yahweh Shai, is love, man. See, we obey Yahweh Shai to love, man. There's nothing else we should want to do, man. It gets to a point to where, you know, um, we're intrigued by what we're hearing, and we believe it, and that belief grows into love, man. And that's why it's and you know, what they say in the world, death before dishonor, and that's out of love. We begin to serve one another. We serve brothers out of love for Yahweh Shai. We got a true love for brothers, man. A true love for the body, the church. It's all out of love. Through love, you're gonna labor, you're gonna toil. Okay, when you really love something, man, you don't have to be motivated, man. When you're doing something out of love, man. When people have a passion for anything, man, you can tell when somebody's really into something, man, or someone. You can really tell. You see, true love can't be fake. Okay, a true passion, a true commitment for something can't be faked. Okay. And it says, "And he that loveth me shall be loved of my Father, and I will love him and will manifest myself to him." Okay? So going back, when you jump around, because St. John 14 pretty heavy. Okay? So let's go here. Let's go back. We'll go back to Isaiah 12. Okay? Well, matter of fact, let's get this real quick. Because what did Yahweh Shai put emphasis on first? Dealing with the commandments. Okay, when you go to Matthew, all right, Matthew 22 and 34 said, "But when the Pharisees had heard that he put the Sadducees to silence, they were gathered together. Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him, and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law. Okay, so you had the Pharisees come and ask him what is the greatest commandment in the law. Now the Pharisees, these were men, that was extremely zealous when it came to the law. And it pushed a lot of them to be over righteous. The Sadducees, them were like some black boule niggas. Them niggas living it up. Okay, in Rome. It was like some uh, some fraternity priests, like some frats. They was like masons, damn near. Okay, but they was priests. When you go into the Sadducees, man, they was well off. They were juiced in. Okay, the Pharisee was more orthodox. Okay, it was more old fashioned when it came to the customs, the tradition, the law. Okay, and they was hard body. All right, that's why Apostle Paul, he was a Pharisee. All of them wasn't wicked. You had more of the Pharisees convert, to follow Yahushua than the Sadducees. Them niggas there, like I said, they was on some black boule, gatekeeper type. When you look into the Sadducees, do the research, look it up, you know. But it says, but when the Pharisees, all right, had heard that he put the Sadducees to silence, they were gathered together. Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him and saying, Master, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Okay, Master, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Okay, so they want to go into the technicalities of the law. Okay, and then what they're doing, they're trying to trip Yahushua. All right, but he counters, all right, in the spirit. You see, and this is an actual dialogue, okay? But we can frame myself in the ministry off, all right, these two laws, okay? These two commandments of Yahushua, which encapsulate the whole law, okay? Without going into the technicalities, okay? Where there's no way we can keep all the technicalities of the law in this flesh and in this setup, okay? In this captivity. Okay, but we can operate in this mindset given by Yahweh Shah, Matthew 22:37. Yahweh Shah said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy power with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. Okay, so we can love the Heavenly Father. Okay, and now the love for the Heavenly Father, we're not going to worship other gods, serve other gods, be into other books, give our time and energy, you know, to serving and worshiping and following, any other deity, man, any other, any false religion. Okay. Nah, man, we're going to be dedicated to our one true power. Everything that we do is going to be centered around Yahweh Bashim Shah. Our belief, okay, is based on Yahweh Bashim Shah, doctrine. Okay. We know when we look for protection, we look to our power. We look for healing, we look to our power, man. We look for understanding, we look to our power, man. We don't outsource nothing, man. Okay, and everything that we do outside of the Most High, just like a woman would check in. A woman might be looking into something, okay, but then she would check in with her husband to make sure, like, okay, I've been looking at this. What you think about this? And what the husband to get an answer like, okay, yeah, that's cool. We can, you can incorporate that, you know, you see, or he'll shut it down, and that's how, it is the relationship we have with the Heavenly Father, you know. And we check, we run everything through what? The scriptures, man, which is the authority, which is our power, prayer, certain things the Lord, speaks to us and, you know, through prayer, through dreams, through certain things that the Lord shows us, certain signs that the Lord gives us as an answer to particular situations, man. Okay, He confirms certain things or He shuts things down. And that's us, like as a woman going through her husband for everything. Like, okay, what you think about this? What's with this? And then as you get familiar with the Heavenly Father, just like a woman that gets familiar with her husband, she already know the answer when it comes to particular things. Okay? So us with the Heavenly Father, we already know the answer. There's certain things that you gotta, we know, okay, hell no. or okay, that's cool. You see, either way, but it comes out of loving the Heavenly Father with all our soul, all right, with all our mind. All right. It said this is the first and great commandment. You see? It says, and the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law of the prophets, man, and loving thy neighbor as thyself, man. You know, and that's something that has to be practiced. Okay? Because out of loving thy neighbor as thyself, what? By default, you're gonna keep laws. Okay, you're not gonna commit adultery. Okay, you're not gonna steal, you're not gonna bear false witness. Okay, you're not gonna set your brother up for failure, stumbling block. You're not gonna teach a false doctrine. Okay, all these people that teach about the commandments, well, they teach false doctrine. That's breaking the commandment. That's bearing false witness on the scriptures, and that's putting a stumbling block. Those are two laws being broken. Okay, by false doctrine, man. And there's witchcraft, because the scriptures speak about what rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. So you're teaching a false doctrine that's rebelling against the true doctrine. So that's three laws. Just by the three laws being broken by teaching a false doctrine, man. Okay? And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, man. And that's something that we practice and elevate in daily, man. You know, being considerate, man. There's one thing about this world, people are extremely inconsiderate, man. But as we come back into the truth, man, we learn to be considerate, man. We learn, because you don't want, even even beyond, the practicalities of the law, the technicalities of the law. Well, you don't want your brother to feel us. We know how to move to where, okay, this will make me feel like this. I'm not gonna do this to another man. You know, I wouldn't want nobody to put me in this position. Okay, I'm not gonna put this burden on him. I wouldn't want nobody to put that burden on me like that. Okay, I'm gonna consider him like, okay, I gotta consider him and his situation as well. Even if he's capable of doing something, wait, I gotta consider him and his situation. You know, yeah, it might make a situation convenient for me, but if I'm putting a burden on him, well, I wouldn't want to be done like that. You know, so this is something that's constantly practiced. Loving thy neighbors thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Okay, on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Okay, so this these two commandments, you know, it helps us frame ourselves in the truth. Okay, and with these two commandments, by default, we keep the laws that we can keep. By default, we keep the laws that we can keep. Okay, we don't gotta get a lineup. You see, it's something we can keep, and we do it out of love. It ain't out of a checklist of keeping the law. Like, nah, I can do that, so I'm gonna do that. Ain't nothing to talk about. I ain't getting no lineup. All right, I ain't shaving my beard. You see, I ain't eating abomination. Okay, those things we can help. Now we know the food is double, all these long ass words and madness, but we're not intentionally, okay, eating abomination, man. Okay, those are things that out of love for the Heavenly Father. Okay, so the things that we can keep, man, we keep them to the best of our ability, man. You know, and this puts us in the, this makes this is appeasing to the Father, because let's go here. And what else did Yahweh Shah emphasize? Okay, because remember, obeying Yahweh Shah appeases the Father, because Yahweh, the Heavenly Father, is pleased with Yahweh Shah. So if we're pleasing to Yahweh Shah, we're pleasing to the Father. Okay, so let's go here. And I think that's I think it's 21. It's St. John 21 and 15 says, so when they had dined, Yahushua said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these? He said unto him, yeah, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He said unto him, feed my lambs. He said to him again the second time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? He said unto him, yeah, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He said unto him, feed my sheep. Okay. He said unto him the third time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? Peter was grieved because he had said unto him the third time, lovest thou me? And he said unto him, Lord, thou knowest all things. Thou knowest that I love thee. Yahushua said unto him, feed my sheep. Okay, which is to teach, man. So Yahushua, all right, he commanded us to teach. He commanded us to go out to the highways and byways and be it to the marriage, which is teaching, man. To invite his people, okay, to the marriage, man, which is his second coming, when we'll be joined with our power forever. All right, we'll be reunited, we'll be reconciled with our power. But it begins with us being reconciled in the spirit before we're spiritually reconciled to our power. Before we physically reconciled to our power, man. Okay, those new bodies with the laws within us, we're going to be in those chambers in that chariot. That's going to be the consummation of the reconciliation. Right now, we're in a betrothal period, man. So we're bidding, to a marriage. We're giving, when we teaching, we're, all right, inviting to the marriage, which Yahushua, he commanded us to what? Be it to the marriage. Okay? He commanded Peter to what? To teach, feed his sheep. With what? Understanding, with knowledge and understanding. So we have our marching orders. We have, those two laws, which are, which is a framework, okay, for us to grow in the spirit. You see? And we have our marching orders, man, to teach, to go out to the highways and byways, man. That's why even, it's cool to do sit downs, but the main work is out there on the highways, man, because our King commanded us, man. All right, let's get that. Matthew 22 and 22 and 9. All right. 22 and 9, it says, go ye therefore into the highways, and as many as you shall find, be it to the marriage. Okay? Because that's probably another lesson, spin-off lesson in itself. Alvarata's you jot that down, Salakia. Yep. So that'd be a good side lesson, spin-off lesson to get into, being bid to the marriage, man. But this is a commandment. All right, so let's go here. Let's go back to let's go back to Isaiah 12 and 1. Read again. Okay, this is the book of Isaiah, chapter 12, and verse 1. It says, in that day thou shalt say, O Lord, I will praise thee. Though thou wast angry with me, thy anger is turned away, and thou comfortest me. Okay? So the Lord's anger was appeased through Yahushua. And as we appease, all right, as we appease Yahushua, okay, the Lord's anger is turned from us. Okay? His anger is turned away, and now we're comforted, man. You see, that's why Yahushua promised to send back what? This is St. John chapter 14 again. Okay, in verse 16, it says, and I will pray to the Father, and he shall give you another comforter, that he may abide with you forever. Okay? So we are being comforted now. The Lord has took away anger from off the elect. All right, his anger from off the hopeful elect and replaced it with comfort. All right, the comforter, man. Okay, which is faith and understanding in these scriptures. Okay, and it's abiding with us, in this time. The Lord will we endure, You know, we're gonna be comforted all the way throughout this thing until we get on those chariots, man. You know, so that was the point. Just wanted to tap into that. You know, Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you sisters was edified once again. Want to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Kakadash. Double honors unto the apostles, the elders, GMS, who rule well, teach well, being great examples to us younger brothers, and peace and blessings, salutations to the hopeful and Shalom.